and they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute the new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect the safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate the governments long established should be not changed for the light transient causes, and according to all experience has shown, the mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable than to the right themselves by abolishing these forms to which they are accustomed, but when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing an invariable the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism. It is their right, it is their duty to throw off government and to provide new guards for the future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and there is now necessary the necessity which constrains them to alter the form systems of government. The history of the President King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries, usurpations, I hope, all having in direct object the establishment of the absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws that most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in the operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass the laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless these people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislation and the right inestimable to them, formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislation bodies at the place unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representation houses repeatedly for opposing with many firmness in his envisions on the rights of people. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislation powers incapable of alienation have returned to the people at large for excessive, and the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all dangers of invasion from without and convulsive convolutions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migration hither, and raising conditions of the appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their office and his amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new officers and sent his swarms of officers to harass people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies with consistent of our legislators. He has effected to render the military independent of our superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and acknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to the acts of pretended legislation for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us. for protecting them by mock trial from punishment from any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in neighboring provinces, established therein by arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries, so as to render it as at once, for example, a fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, altering fundamental forms of our governments, and suspending our laws, our own legislation, and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated the government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coast, burned our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He has at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with the circumstances of cruelty and perfidious sacredly power in the most barbarous ages and totally unworth the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against our country, to become executioners of our friends and brethren, or to fool themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrection among us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages known as the rule of warfare. It is undistinguished destruction of all ages and sexes and conditions. In every state of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be a ruler of the free people. Nor have we been wanting to, in attentions to our British brethren, we have warned them from time to time of attempts of their legislator to extend the unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity and have conjured them by ties of a common kindred to disavow these usurpations which would inevitably interpret our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voices of justice and necessity. Nope, I missed that. And one of those words.
We get it.
We must therefore, in necessity, which denounces the separation and we hold the rest of mankind enemies in war and peace and friends. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the restitute of our intentions due in the name by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that we as a free independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things independent states do of right, may do of right. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protective and divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other in our lives, other fortunes, and our sacred honor. Signed by New Hampshire, Joshua Bartlett, William Whipple, Matthew Thornton, Massachusetts, John Hancock, Samuel Adams, John Adams, Robert Treat Payne, Elbridge Gerry, Rhode Island, Stephen Hopkins, William Ellery, Connecticut, Roger Sherman, Samuel Huntington, William Williams, Oliver Wolcott. New York, William Floyd, Philip Livingston, Francis Lewis, Lewis Morris. New Jersey, Richard Stockton, John Weatherspoon, Francis Hopkins, John Hart, Abraham Clark. Pennsylvania, Robert Morris, Benjamin Rush, Benjamin Franklin, John Morton, George Clamer, James Smith, George Taylor, James Wilson, George Ross. Delaware, Caesar Rodney, George Reed, Thomas McKean, not McCain. Maryland, Samuel Chase, William Packer, Thomas Stone, Charles Carroll of Carleton, whatever that is. Virginia, George White, Richard Henry Lee, James Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Harrison, Thomas Nelson Jr., Francis Lightfoot Lee, Carter Baxton. North Carolina, William Hooper, Joseph Hughes, John Penn. South Carolina, Edward Rutledge, Thomas Hayward Jr., Thomas Lynch Jr., Arthur Milton. Georgia, Button Gwinnett,
Go Gwinnett!
Lyman Hall, and George Walton. Most of these guys died corpus. Thank you.
Yep.
Got it.